Good evening. I think we can agree with most of what our opponents have said, just not with the proposition. We can agree that Saudi Arabia is not a place that most of us would particularly want to live. Saudis like to live there, but they have a version of Islam that is repugnant to many Americans. We can agree with that. We can agree that Saudi Arabia, both privately and publicly, puts a lot of money into trying to spread their version of Islam. This is what Mr. Marshall referred to as striving for a political order that represents a reactionary version of Islam. Yeah, Saudis are trying to do that. There are some other groups around the world who are trying to do that. And some of them get money from the Saudis. No, we're not going to deny that. We're not going to deny that women in many Muslim countries face what Asra said was an unacceptable situation. Yeah, they do. Many others don't, but many do. Nor are we going to claim that religious equality or enjoyment of human rights as we understand them in this country are universal in the Muslim world. We're not going to raise an issue on any of this. But that isn't what the proposition is. The proposition is that radicals dominate Islam. Now we've heard other words like hegemony. After all, as David just said, 36% of British Muslims think that apostasy deserves death, and that's hegemony. Well, not by my count. 36% is 36%. You want a majority if you want hegemony. The fact that in Britain, virtually all of the Muslims come from one particular, rather benighted part of Pakistan and do not in any way, by any measure, represent a cross-section of the Muslim world should also be taken into account. See, the problem is, and let me go back to Mr. Rosenkranz's very opening remarks, he was talking about numbers that showed that in Muslim countries around the world, you have a lot of people who are anti-American. We do, yeah. Well, that I don't think is ununderstandable. But the question is whether that has anything to do with Islam, or whether that is objecting to American policies. Now, if you want to say that anyone who objects to U.S. government actions is by definition a radical, well, then maybe you get somewhere. But even then, I don't think so, because what has not been talked about here is the fact that most of the countries in the Muslim world are not governed by Muslim regimes. They're governed by autocratic dictatorships. Most of the political activity of Muslims that gives rise to strong political statements has to do with opposing, living under totalitarianism. Most of the people in the Muslim world have not, nor did their parents, nor will their grandchildren in all likelihood, had any opportunity to participate in or choose the governments under what they live. Now, the fact of the matter is that when they object to autocratic rule, two things happen. One is that they fall back on their religious faith and say, well, Islam can help us against this autocracy. The second one is they say, who is supporting the dictatorships that we live in? Lo and behold, I say it's the United States. So that when you have Muslims objecting to U.S. policies, it's more frequently that they are objecting to the support the United States gives to autocratic rule, whether it is in Egypt or in Saudi Arabia or in Pakistan. This is the crux of the matter in the Muslim world. You don't have, most Muslims in the Muslim world are not sitting there trying to decide whether they want a Saudi conservative puritanical version of Islam or whether they want, Reza Aslan to be the Muslim Pope. I mean, this is not This is not where the debate is. It isn't about what Islam is like.
Good debate, though.
Good debate, yeah. What it's about is 1 billion people, 2/3 of whom do not live in democratic systems and who are looking to their tradition and their faith tradition to try to work for a better life and a more participatory role in the polities that they live in. And they find that Islam is satisfying to them as a political option. It isn't the option that most of us would choose, but we do know that in this country, we do have many Americans who feel that religion is part of their political life. Unless I miss my guess, this accounts for a big chunk of the Republican Party. But we sort of say, well, okay, here in New York, we don't particularly like to talk about those people, but nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that these people find satisfaction in their turn to religion as an effort to stand up against autocracy, and they find that the American support for autocrats is reprehensible, and they discover that in the American way of things, there will be enormous publicity given to anything negative about Islam, not just by the American press, but because the various autocrats will feed the American government and the American press negative things because they're trying to protect the privileged position that they have set up over the last 50 years of totalitarian rule. And therefore, I would say that if there is anything that's dominating in the Muslim world, not dominating in Islam, but dominating in the Muslim world, it's dictatorship, not radical Muslims.
Richard Bulliet, thank you very much.